I will just start with the most obvious with LaMelo. He's looked like an absolute star. Before he got hurt, he was on an absolute tear. Like, he literally was like 30 in like however many games in a row. It was like 25 in the games he didn't. Good efficiency. We know what he does as a playmaker, like across the board. He's looked incredible. And as somebody who was pretty low on LaMelo going into the year, he was really proving me wrong. Now, one of the main concerns with him was the just injury concern. And for him to get injured again, like, that's not good. But when he's on the court, he really looked amazing. And that's a promising sign no matter what you're looking at. The other main high point that I want to look at is Brandon Miller. I've been high on him for a while, and obviously he got a lot of hate on draft day where it's like, oh, how did they take him over Scoot? But his scoring game, I thought he was averaging like 10 or so. I looked today, and he's up to like 14 points per game. So not like some of the superstar level, like 20 points year one type seasons we've seen from some guys recently. I feel like we've been kind of spoiled. Like guys like Luka or Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Edwards, like they come in year one and are like already like crazy scorers. But Brandon Miller, even being what he is now, like I can tell his scoring game's translated really well. Whenever his moves, like his bag, I'll say, translates well, it gets him good space, good shot creation, very effective. And the efficiency numbers look good along with that. Like we talk about like how efficient Chet's been and how not efficient Wemby's been. Like Brandon Miller, not in a great situation, true rookie, still been able to be quite efficient with just really good scoring prowess. So I got to give him his credit there. Things that I don't like so much. Number one, it looked like for a decent stretch last year that the increased minutes load and really taking your center position to Mark Williams and Nick Richards was going to start to turn this defense around. And I'm not going to say that it's all on them because while the center position is the most important to defense, it's not going to be everything. But they're the worst defense in the league. For a team who we said, oh, they finally found the defensive anchors for the future, being the worst defensive team in the league is not very promising. But I still think you can keep the ship because we've seen good out of them. And that's going to bring me to the thing that I dislike the least. And that's going to be the coaching on this team. They need a coaching change desperately. When you have a defensive coach in there and you have the worst defense in the league and you have centers who have shown defensive talent, but you can't put together anything to have a not worst in the league defense, that's a problem with you. And especially when this is a team who, with the talent they have, could have a damn solid offense, but even their offense isn't good. And when you have an engine like LaMelo and some solid pieces around him in terms of offense, they should be a lot better on that end. And I think that comes with coaching. Whatever direction they decide to go, if they just get like an offensive guru or something who can really take LaMelo and turn them into something like a Kings or a Pacers, where they have this complete engine point guard, because LaMelo is showing me this year that he's on a similar tier to a Tyrese, to a Fox. If they can put a coach that's going to really like maximize that, that's a step in the right direction. Or if they want to get a defensive guy who can actually put together a solid defense, that works too. But either way, something has to change because you have centers with defensive potential, and I think their main guys, like LaMelo, he's a big guard. He should be able to be decent. PJ should be able to be decent. They're not, but they should be able to be. They have the physical tools to be able to be decent.
I think PJ is a good defender.
He is a good defender. I'd argue at times he's the best defender on this team.
Yeah.
But after that, it's rough outside of their centers.
So for them to be literally 30 out of 30 on defense, that's just unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And I'll say this quickly, like Miles Bridges, he's looked good. I really don't feel like giving Miles Bridges props, but he has looked good. So the bright spots for them, LaMelo before he got hurt, I really like what I've seen for Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges. Negatives of this team, you have some defensive front court talent and you're 30 out of 30. That's an absolute coaching failure and honestly kind of a front office failure. They need an overhaul.
The worst thing that happened to this team was Kenny Atkinson saying no. Like backing out. That was the worst thing that could have happened to this team, because that's the coach that has been credited, even though he hasn't had a job, which feels like forever. But he's been credited a lot with developing young teams and making them more competitive than what they probably should be. And gosh, I wish he would have taken the job. And maybe there was reasons why he didn't want to, but I feel like for this organization, that would have been great to have that kind of coach. Because Steve Clifford, look, he's not that ceiling raising type of coach, man. He's just not that kind of guy. Like, if you have like some vets, like a veteran type team, he can make them decently competitive, maybe compete like how he did in like Orlando, like do stuff like that, right? But he's not the guy that you want with a young team. It reminds me a lot of when the Pelicans went and got Stan Van Gundy. Like, that's like, you got an older guy that's more of like an old school type coach trying to mesh with these young 19, 20-year-old players. Like, it's not a good match. You kind of got to read the room. Like, maybe you should get somebody that has more experience with young teams. That's the worst thing that happened. I'm glad you brought that up, Gabe. And really, like, there's not much for me to add on to what you said, other than like LaMelo was playing so damn good, and they were a competitive bad team, like a team that's we know is not going to be good. But we watched them beat the Celtics. Like, we watched them beat Indiana. We watched them, I think, be competitive with like the Bucks. Like, they've been really competitive against some good teams. But you take LaMelo out of the fold because he does so much for this team on that offensive side of the floor. They're just not. They're bad. They're awful. They're not good without him. Like, they're just really bad. So the fact that he was playing the best basketball of his career in another ankle injury, it kind of worries me just a little bit, because he had a couple ankle injuries last season, then another one on top of this season. Not sure what the timetable is supposed to be on that, but it's a little worrisome for somebody that's already had some injury history. And, you just got to kind of keep an eye on it. I mean, I remember during draft time, that's why I think Dev, like, we were super adamant about them taking Scoot, because you're like, even though you got LaMelo, he's somebody that's shown can't really stay on the floor that much over the course of his career. So it's a little worrisome, and it's a shame because he was playing so good. Like, I was on Twitter arguing with people about LaMelo Ball, because I'm like, this guy doesn't get the respect that he deserves because he's in Charlotte. There's not a good team, but he makes them watchable, and without him, they're just an awful team. And it's a shame, but hopefully at some point, I'm sure this season will hopefully spark that front office to make a coaching change, and they can get somebody that kind of matches the war of this team. Maybe they trade off of some of those guys, some of those vets like Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, try and get some value for those guys. But we've been asking them to do that for like 2 seasons now, and they still haven't done it. So, not much to say, but yeah, it sucks for LaMelo. That's the one thing that I'm just – because it looked somewhat promising, but it's not that much anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern with LaMelo. I mean, like you said, it's been ankle injury after ankle injury after ankle injury now, and it's a bit concerning because we've seen some guys like Curry who have had ankle problems and moved past them, but ankles are also one of those things that can linger and just continue to be an issue. So hopefully for LaMelo's sake, that is less of an issue for moving forward, but not a good start so far this year, despite the fact he was so good when healthy. I'd also start given the fact that we really didn't see him, Rozier, and Bridges play all three together on the same court at the same time. I mean, Bridges is only up to 6 games now. Rozier's up to 7. Multiple of those have been since LaMelo has been injured. So they haven't really seen arguably their top 3 guys on the floor together very much. So despite the fact that LaMelo was good and they were competitive, we still never really saw how good this team could be if healthy. And that was one of our main concerns coming into the year, of course, with LaMelo and some of the other guys they have on the team. Can they stay healthy? And so far, that just hasn't rung true. Glad you guys brought up the coaching because, I mean, Borrego should have just never been fired in the first place, in my opinion, when he did. It was very odd. Came off of 3 years of just continuing to improve. And yeah, you got smacked in the play-in. So be it. You're a young, improving team who went from a 23-win season to a 33-win season to a 43-win season. One game should not decide that, or 2 games if you want to go off the previous year's playing game. It was very odd to me. And they've now put themselves in a situation where we're now still talking about, just like we did when they initially made the hire, this coach is just not going to do the job for what they need. And that's just the reality of the situation. And like you said, Gabe, the defense hasn't been great, and the offense hasn't been elite as it probably should be. And that's a great argument, because when they had their 33-win season, or their 43-win season, the last time they made the play-in, they were 6th in offensive rating. The team, in theory, should be better on the offensive end now. You can argue Mason Plumlee's gone. Sure, maybe that hurts a little bit, but Melo's better. Brandon Miller's in town. Tyrik Rozier's still doing his thing. Like, this should be an elite offense, and it's just not been that. Now, again, their top 3 offensive guys have not regularly played together this year, but even still, Bridges is getting close to 20 a night. Rozier's getting close to 20 a night. They should still be a very good offense, and they just haven't been that. Now, to regards with their defense, like you say, their defense has not been good. It screams coaching, because the personnel should not be this bad. PJ has been great. Really like what I've seen from him early days. The shooting struggled a little bit over the last week and a half or so, but I've really liked what I've seen from PJ this year. Mark Williams has looked great. Nick Richards looks even better again this year. He's been absurdly efficient on offense as well. Still young and still not great on that end, but Brandon Miller has shown me flashes on the defensive end as well. He's competing. He's had some good on-ball moments. So there's some things to work with here. They just need some new fits. And like you also alluded to, Rick, they need to move off some of these vets. Gordon Hayward's finally in the last year of his deal, so hopefully this is finally the year they move off of him. He's had a couple of good scoring performances to start the year, so maybe this is the year they finally get off of him, start to bring in a few new pieces on the wings. So we'll see. It's still a lot of a work in progress. It's contingent on LaMelo's health. It's contingent on them getting a new head coach, which they've needed to do since they brought in their last new one, because it just wasn't a good hire. Borrego was a weird fire, and they haven't had a good coach in there since. And like you said, Reek, it's really too bad Kenny Atkinson was not in the job. That would have been ideal for them. I think they'd be in a much different spot because of that. But I still like the talent here. I still think they have a lot to work with. And they're still really young. I mean, this is a team that, even though they were still in the play-in a couple of years ago, they're not in a rush. LaMelo's young. Mark Williams is young. Bridges is young. Brandon Miller, they've just drafted. Like, they still have a lot of pieces. PJ Washington can be in that conversation too. They still have a lot of young pieces, and they do still have time to figure this out. I just hope they don't let it sit a little bit too long. I think they need to make this head coaching change sooner rather than later. Maybe it's in season. At the latest, it probably needs to be next off season, because given the market and given the fact that if they continue to play pretty badly, I don't want to cause too much speculation that's not there, but like, we know how star trades go in this league, and LaMelo Ball is probably not going to be a guy who just sticks around on a continuously bad team year after year in a small market. So hopefully the change is made, because I really like what they have from a personnel standpoint in Charlotte. I think it could be a really fun young team, and I like the comparison to the Kings, Gabe. I think with the right moves, the Kings looked pretty bad too, and they got the right pieces around De'Aaron Fox. I think the Hornets have better pieces already now than the Kings had around De'Aaron Fox 18 to 24 months ago, but they are still probably some coaching decisions and some personnel decisions away from getting where they need to be.
I mean, yeah, that was the biggest thing with Sacramento, was really the coaching change, even more so than the Sabonis trade or any free agent signings. Really just that Mike Brown signing turned everything around for them. But, yeah, really, really for them going forward, it's just Steve Clifford has to go, and especially with the way Brandon Miller's been developing and how he's looked, like, Gordon Hayward has to go. Personally, like, I'm not even mad if he's out of the rotation before the year ends. He's not efficient. He's not, like, a good defender. Like, I don't think he's providing anything. And if anything, he's just taking minutes and opportunities away from the two forwards that you have. Of people on the court right now, your two forwards and Miller and Bridges are literally, like, going to be your two best players. So for Gordon Hayward to be taking up 30 minutes a night or more, it's just not worth it. And it's like, there's no, like, trade value when you can speak of. He's on the last year of his deal, and nobody's taking on that contract when he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So, like, I would love to see his minutes go down before the end of the season. I will
Yeah,
say that.
that would be ideal. They just probably won't because, well, at least in theory, they won't and shouldn't in the argument of just keeping his value up to trade him. That's the only argument there is for that, but that's hopefully their thought process. Maybe a team like Philly wants him when they flip a couple of their expiring contracts to get him just to improve their depth a little bit, but
I mean,
that's really the only argument for him to be continuing to get as many minutes as he has been. I agree.
if he's on this team in like February after the trade deadline, I'll just sit him the last 20 games.
I agree, man. Because like, even though Book Knight's had his issues, give him minutes. You spend a top 10, 11 pick on him. Just give him minutes. You're not going to be good. Give Bryce McGowan some of those Gordon Hayward minutes, and then just let Brandon Miller be the wing, and Miles Bridges, let those guys be the wings going forward. Because Gordon Hayward's not, even if LaMelo was out there, like he's not improving this team. Like he's just not. So you might as well try and get off him if you can, and then like Gabe said, if you can't move him at the deadline, maybe you don't want to buy him out. Just sit the guy. Just sit him. Because one, that'll keep him healthy. So whenever he goes to his next spot, he can still get a decent contract and try and make an impact because we know he's another injury-prone guy. And two, you got plenty of young guys, even outside of Bridges and Brandon Miller, that could use some run on the court. So it would just be a smart thing. If you keep Terry Rozier, I don't hate that because he's still a young-ish guy, even though he's been in the league for 7-8 years. But I wouldn't hate keeping Terry Rozier around just because he's probably another reason why the offense hasn't been as potent, because we know what Terry can do. He's an explosive, 20-point per game guy over the last, 3-4 seasons. So he's definitely been missed in the rotation consistently, since he's been out with injury. But, with LaMelo being out, this just gives them all more reason to kind of buy into what we are. It's a bad team that needs to move on from their head coach. I wouldn't hate if they took a page out of the Timberwolves and the Atlanta Hawks playbook and sign the guy that they want right now or, mid-season or whatever as a head coach, because why not get that, a little bit of a head start, build some continuity, see which guys you want to keep and stuff like that under the head coach. I wouldn't hate if they did that. But would they do it? Probably not. Steve Clifford probably has his job safe for the rest of the season, to be honest, because they just like the guy. They love the guy. They brought him back.
Rozier should definitely stay for now, especially with LaMelo out for extended time. Whenever Rozier comes back, he's going to be the best guard on the roster. And you look at that guard rotation right now, outside of those two, it's Ish Smith and Theo Maledon. The guard depth isn't there. And honestly, if they're going to continue to be this bad this season, if there's a shooting guard prospect out there, that's who they should be looking at. Any shooting guard prospects, because assuming they have the centers locked down, LaMelo's your point guard. You got a couple good forwards, and because PJ just got a new contract, Miller's going to be there for a little bit. You assume Miles ain't going nowhere else. That secondary guard, that's really that's the piece besides a coach that this team is missing.
We're like a 3-and-D type 2 guard, like a Herbert Jones type of guy. I'm just thinking a guy like that. That might be.
That would be ideal because not to say that Nick Smith Jr. doesn't have a shot because still just coming off of a first-round pick this year, but he's not going to be a great defensive guy, especially the 2-guard spot. He's a bit undersized there. Obviously, Book Knight hasn't done much, and even if he does develop the offensive side of his game, he hasn't looked like he's going to be a great defensive piece. So that's arguably more what they need. But if that's the way they're heading, I hope they give at least one of Book Knight or Nick Smith Jr. a bit of a chance before the end of the year, because having 2 shooting guard first-round picks over the last 3 years and then having to replace both of them wouldn't be a great look. I know Nick Smith Jr. was a pretty late first, but even still, wouldn't be the greatest look to have 2 first-round picks over 3 years and end up using neither of them at the same position.
Well, really, he was supposed to be a lottery guy. I think he got hurt in college, so it's they kind of got lucky, and it was oh, this guy kind of fell to us. So, you, especially if you're just bad, you just got to see what you got, man. It's not like the Kings with Davion Mitchell. It's look, you're not good, we're good, so we're not going to play you, right? It's not like that situation, but it's we're not a good team. LaMelo's out for God knows how long. you might as well just give these guys minutes. Book night, hey, you haven't really been in rotation last couple of years, but hey, we'll give you 15 minutes here. Do something with them. Nick Smith Jr., rookie, we'll give you 15 minutes. Do something with them. Like, you might as well just do that. Just try that because you have nothing to lose at this point. You weren't even expected to be that good of a team. Maybe a back end fighting for the play-in at best is what people were probably looking at with this Hornets team. So I hope they do that too. But if Steve Clifford's still there, you never really know, man. That's what we were worried about when they made. I remember when they made the hire, and we talked about it I remember that, like we talked about that on the podcast. We're just like, that's not good. Like that's not a good sign for Mark Williams, who they had just drafted, and it wasn't a good sign because Mason Plumlee was taking up those minutes.